Now we're going to talk about the bridge design pattern, and this design pattern is perhaps not one of the most often used design patterns, but it is a useful one. And the idea here is if you have two parts of your code that is sort of commingled and the two different parts are changing rapidly, and the idea of the bridge design pattern is to separate those two parts of your code apart and connect them with a well-designed bridge connection that lets you separate them and handle them in a way that you don't have to deal with the two parts being co-mingled together and therefore changing rapidly together. You want to just, again, the idea is to extract the parts of your code that are changing fast and to keep them separate so that you can handle them more efficiently. For example, say that you're designing remotes for cars, and you want to design a remote starter and a remote unlock key remote and so forth, all those kind of things. So you have different types of remotes you want to work on, but you also need different types to handle different types of cars. So these are two different things in your application, and you have to add different types of cars, add different types of remotes, and the result can be kind of a mess because you've got to handle all different kinds of cars and different kinds of remotes together. So let's separate them apart. And here's how that might look with a bridge design pattern. And you have the remotes over here and the kinds of cars over here. For example, an alarm remote, a remote that sets the alarm on a car, a remote starter, and a door lock unlocker type of remote. Okay, so those are the three types of remotes. The kind of cars we'll be dealing with in this example are Toyota and Honda, for example. And you set up a bridge between the remotes and the cars. So the remote now has a type of car. In other words, the car object will be stored inside the remote. That's a has relationship. In a has relationship, the first class is going to include an object of the second type, the second class, and that is a has relationship. The first class has an object of the second class. That's a has relationship. And that's the idea. That's the bridge. In this case, the has relationship because the remote will then have a car type of object inside it that tells you what kind of car that this remote is designed for. So the idea is that you have broken out the parts of your code that are changing rapidly as you add new cars, new car types, as you add new remote types. You want to establish a well-defined bridge so that you can relate the two different types of code that is being altered, being changed, and you want to separate those two different types of code. You can do that if you establish some kind of bridge and you carefully design and think about that design pattern and say this is a bridge between these two different parts so that we don't have to have everything mixed together. You have a Toyota alarm remote and a Toyota remote starter, and a Honda alarm remote, and so forth. You don't have to mix everything together. Instead, you can have a well-defined bridge between the two parts of your code that are volatile, the two parts of your code that are changing a lot, and this is often done as a has relationship, saying that the remote has a type of car object involved with it. So that's the idea of a bridge, is that if you have two different parts of your code that have been commingled and are changing rapidly, to keep things from getting out of control, to keep things from getting too articulated, you want to establish a bridge between the two different types of code that is changing and separate them out from each other so they're completely independent except for the bridge, and then use that bridge to relate the two sections of code together. So that helps a lot when you're designing and maintaining your code, in that it helps you maintain that separation. And the idea here is, once again, as so often in design patterns, is divide and conquer, and you're going to divide the problem into two rather than having these commingled parts of your code working interchangeably inside and interconnectedly inside each other and causing a lot of problems. You want to separate out those parts of your code that you can and maintain a bridge between them, well-defined relationship between them, so you can then actually work on those two parts independently. And that is the bridge design pattern.